One thing I wanted to ask you about, you see a lot of the ads. I think some businesses have they did like a direct mail piece, and I'm talking about the Good RX.
Yes.
And the yellow card. And if you use this card, you're going to save tons of money. Is this something that is accepted at Lowell's Pharmacy? Are you in the Good RX program?
We do not accept the card. We do accept various we don't call them discount because they're technically called a coupon card that a lot of the different manufacturers will put out for their own specific brand name product. Like they'll have a new insulin that comes out, and it's got it's only by the brand name because the company still has the patent on it. And a lot of times those prices are pretty high, but they'll have a coupon card to offset those prices for people that don't have insurance. And we kind of talk behind the counter between my employees, and if they can afford to do this with most people that are not going to have insurance, why can't they just make the price of the medication that low? And I think a lot of it has to do with insurance and the fact that most people are being forced into insurance. And once the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, kind of went into place and had been in place for a couple of years, it had various stair steps of being implemented. And once it got to a point where it was implementing some of the price controls that it does have, right before that happened, a lot of prescription medication prices went way up and have stayed up. And I'm thinking most of the drug company CEOs or whoever is doing the pricing of these is thinking, if everybody has insurance, they're not going to know what the true cost of the medication is. All they care about is their copay, so we can price this at whatever. Mm-hmm. And then for those few people that don't have insurance, we'll put out a coupon card. And Good RX is kind of following that same thinking, because even though they say that you can use it like insurance, you cannot use it with insurance. It's either one or the other. And quite often what we've looked at is the copays are cheaper than what the Good RX price is. Not always, but sometimes when the Good RX, because they're the ones that are setting the price, and the ones that really have a pretty deep discount are a lot of times are way below the cost of that we're just paying for it. So by using the card, we would be losing money. Plus, we also have to pay Good RX every time there's a transaction, and they're getting money by selling information to the manufacturers. They will not sell your personal information, but they'll say, we got 10 people in this zip code, and this zip code is Artesia, New Mexico, that are going to this specific doctor, and so they're able to get that type of information, and then they sell that to the drug manufacturers. And I'm not sure why the drug manufacturers want to know that type of information, but they do. My understanding is that they pay for that a fair amount. Mm-hmm. And so what Good RX is doing is selling information, essentially. That's how they're getting most of their money.
So the customer enrolls in the program, and now there's data.
Correct.
So it's not personal data. In other words, they supposedly can't track specific purchases to specific individuals.
And that is correct, but each card has its own ID number, so
that's true.
If they wanted to, they could do that. Mm-hmm. But it's also, that's violating the HIPAA regulations as it stands right now, but there's nothing to stop GoodRx from holding that information of exactly who you are and what you're getting. They just can't pass that patient, what we call patient identifier information on, but they can pass your medication history on.
Okay. So they're gathering data.
Correct.
Types of drugs that are being prescribed, or types of patients that are, or what doctors are prescribing different things, and then they sell that to these different companies that can then, hey, you're prescribing a lot of this. We'd like for you to prescribe this instead, or something like that. And so
correct, because they can identify the doctor, because the doctor is not a person that is having personal information about them. Mm-hmm. I think that's how it's being defined. The doctor is just the prescriber, so they can say Dr. A is seeing, say, 50 people over the month of January that are all getting drugs for diabetes. Now, they're doing 10 drugs of this particular drug, 10 patients of this particular drug. Of those 50, so 1/5 of the diabetic patients they're seeing are getting this particular drug, and they'll sell that to a drug manufacturer.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting how this whole scheme works, if you will. And a lot of it is because the end user, the patient, is not generally ever responsible for their bill. They are responsible for their insurance premium.
Right.
Or what if they're individual on their own, or if they have some kind of a package deal with their employer. So it's like you said earlier, from the individual standpoint, they what's my copay?
Yes.
You know, what's my premium? What's my copay? And that, to them, that's the cost of health care, is what's the copay. In a very serious situation, you find out what your copay is, because eventually, okay, here's what you're responsible for of this major operation or situation.
Correct. So if you lose a prescription halfway through a month and you need to buy some off of insurance to kind of get you through, then you kind of find out what that true cost is. Or say, I'm going on a trip and I want to get an extra prescription filled ahead of time, and it's too early for insurance to cover, and say, well, what's the cost of it? Some drugs, especially some of the older drugs, are still fairly cheap, and it's cheap enough that you can do that without insurance. It's either close to your copay or not much more than it, because your old drugs, diuretics and that type of stuff that have been around for a long time, that are generic, and there's various numbers of manufacturers all manufacturing the same drug, so there's some competition out there in the market of who do we buy from. But as you kind of get away from those old drugs, and especially if it's a brand name drug that's fairly new, they still have the patent on it, those prescriptions tend to be fairly expensive.
Yeah, it's amazing. And there's a lot of recouping of R&D that's in the cost of a drug when it's approved.
Yes.
Eventually. Not all drugs that are developed get approval.
And that's true too.
Or accomplish what it is that they set out to do. And so there's a lot of money spent on research and development, and then you get the one or two that make it, that, they actually do something good and they get approved by the FDA. Well, it's at that point you say, okay, we gotta make back our investment that we made in all these other things that didn't pan out. So I think people understand that. I think where people get a little bit flustered is, for example, in the case of the COVID vaccines. And some of these manufacturers like Pfizer are wanting to push for authorization for the 4th booster or the 5th booster or the 20th booster, whatever booster we're on right now. But then they report their earnings.
Yes.
And it's huge. And that a big chunk of that is because the government, and this started with the Operation Warp Speed, the government basically came in and said, we're going to guarantee your R&D on this. And we're going to guarantee, and then the government's buying a lot of these vaccines.
Yes.
As opposed to individual hospitals or just individuals on their own going and buying them. I thought it was funny. We bought a COVID test kit. We didn't get one of the free ones. It's the same one.
Yes.
That were handed out for free, but I think our cost was $34.
Yes. That sounds about right.
Yeah, $34. We paid for one. Haven't used it yet. It's sitting there just in case. I don't even know what variant it will test for. But if that cost an individual $34, you can only imagine what the people that manufactured the test kits were charging the government for all the ones that the government bought and then mailed out and distributed to people. And when you look at it, you go, was this $34 worth of stuff? There's a little bit of plastic. There's a couple of test strips, a chemical reaction,
Yes, that's true. And I even had somebody came in and said, well, this looks like a pregnancy test.
Yeah.
And it is using the same type of technology as a pregnancy test. It's different chemicals, so they're testing for different things, but the basic chemistry behind it is the same chemistry that's in a pregnancy test. And so that technology had already kind of been developed. You have to go in and determine and develop what chemicals are going to be able to test for this new virus. So there is some R&D in there, but there's not the big R&D of developing something from scratch. Because that has already, that part's been done.
Yeah.
It's just adapting it to a new test. And I could see where $34, $35, $30 is probably appropriate, but if you're selling them to the government and then you're going to say, and then the government's going to be shipping them out, a lot of times those cost factors are higher. It's kind of like you hear of a hammer being sold to the government for $250.
Yeah.
So
it's an amazing thing to see just how much money is involved in this and how much changes hands and what the different aspects of it are. Bottom line, going back to the Good RX, not every pharmacy accepts the Good RX program. Lowell's Pharmacy, for example, does not. But if you use the Good X,
you're not using the insurance.
You're not using the insurance that you've probably already paid for, or as a part of your employment package.
Correct. And I have heard that sometimes the prices that were set by Good RX are cheaper than the copays, but those are people that have really high copays on their insurance. You got a pretty good, what I would call a good copay, a low copay. You're probably not going to be saving any money.
Yeah.
So, but all the pricing, what we don't like, the pricing on that is set by Good RX, and it's not us. And there's been some times that we have checked our price versus the Good RX, and the Good RX was higher than what we were. That's not saying that happens every time, but it has occasionally. It's been a little while since we've checked prices on it. But it can happen. And I understand that there's been a couple of chains that have started to stop taking it.
Because it's been an issue. Who is GoodRx? Is this an offshoot from a pharmaceutical company or an insurance company? Or
it actually is not. I looked that up, and the people that started, well, the guy that started it back several years ago was from San Francisco, and he was working for one of the higher up people in, I want to say it was Facebook, but I'm not sure. It's one of those
so
technology,
it's a tech company, yeah.
Tech company, and he got noticing that if he went to one pharmacy, a prescription would cost a certain amount, and if he went to another pharmacy, it would be a different amount. He went to another pharmacy, it would be even a different amount if you're doing them all with cash. If you're doing insurance, they're all, those copays normally are the same from pharmacy to pharmacy. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, you'll get a chain that negotiates for a little bit different price on their copay, and that's also where you get some of these insurance companies trying to direct you to a certain chain to get your prescriptions filled. But and a lot of people don't like that heavy-handedness. Mm-hmm. Some people don't mind it, but
yeah.
But this guy was thinking, if I could get one type of mechanism, and that's how he came up with the GoodRx card, where it would be the same price at each one. Well, what he was originally wanting to do was have GoodRx kind of monitor the price of the local pharmacies in the San Francisco area, and that way he would know which one had the cheapest price. And that kind of grew from there, and there were, I want to say, 3 or 4 other people from tech companies that he kind of recruited to be in the starting program of GoodRx, and then it has kind of morphed into what it is now. But originally it was just a way of finding out what local pharmacies would charge you for a prescription, and you'd say amoxicillin 530 capsules. What's the price at Pharmacy A and Pharmacy B and Pharmacy C? But and that's originally how it worked. You would have to put in what drug it was, what strength it was, how many your prescription was for. But now it's kind of evolved to this type of thing where it's more of a kind of a standard coupon type card than it is a place to find out who has the better price.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I'm sure that they've sold it. I don't know. I don't want to say anything that's, a conspiracy theorist would say, but it sounds like it's one of those startups that then gets bought up by who then repurpose it to, they see a different potential for it than what maybe the founder envisioned for it. And
that may have happened. I was just looking up how it got started.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the same guy is still the head of it or not. So.
Yeah, you never know. If he's not, if he went ahead and cashed out, he's probably got an island, somewhere off the coast of China where he just kind of hangs out and spends his days, looking for the man with the golden gun.
Yes,
that's a movie reference there, folks.
It is. James Bond.
That's right. That's right. So, it's all interesting, and so I guess last question or last topic. Going back to the COVID deal, people are still testing positive for COVID. Some people are seeing some effects from it. They're showing some symptoms. Has the advice for people on how to be best prepared to ward off a COVID infection if they do get it, or if they do wind up getting symptoms from a COVID exposure, are the treatments, what are recommended treatments that people are being advised about right now?
They really haven't changed that over time. It's just that they're noticing that the effect of COVID is much weaker now than what it used to be. Still possibility of getting a severe case of it that you might need to go to the hospital for. So that possibility is still out there. So if you get it and you get, this is just COVID, you can't think of it just like it's a summer cold or something like that, of which most people, that's all they're really kind of getting. You just treat the symptoms, and it's the same recommendations since the beginning for those mild cases. You just got to be aware that if it still is getting worse, that you might need to get to the hospital.
Yeah. But treat the symptoms like you treat any other flu, basically.
Correct.
In that regard, that's interesting, and I'm glad it's not any worse than what it is. I'm glad these variants that are coming down are not as bad, and I don't know how much data where they're comparing the natural immunity, and of course. Immunity from what? Well, I have natural immunity because of this variant or this exposure. Well, does that natural immunity provide any kind of protection for this variant or for this thing? But you could ask the same questions about the vaccines too, I guess.
Yes, you can, and that is still, I do believe that research is ongoing. There's no definite answer out there about that, but there is some information about what I would say cross-variant studies and resistance. So if you've had one variant, and you should have that immunity to it, and that should protect you from most other ones. I don't know if it's all variants or not. That's what they're doing more research on.
Yeah.
And some people have called the Omicron variant kind of nature's vaccine.
Yeah. A conspiracist would say the people behind all this said, all right, that's enough. Let's go ahead and get this released. Where do you want to start? Let's start in Africa. Okay, we'll go to Africa. They don't have much because at the time, I don't think there was very high vaccination rate in Africa.
I believe that's correct, and I believe Africa is still behind the rest of the world.
Yeah, as far as the vaccines are concerned. So let's release it there. A conspiracist would say. I want to make it clear, I am a radio guy. I don't know anything about the science behind all this, but that's great. Anything else you need to mention this morning?
Not at this time that I can think of.
All right.
Have
Kirk
a
Irby.
good Mother's Day.
Same to you and everybody else out there. Kirk, thank you so much. You can always find him behind the counter at Lowell's Pharmacy in
That's
Artesia.
right.
So, all right, let's take